Morning, everybody. Two things. This really does show why self-organization doesn't work, hey? Everybody sits as possibly far away as possible to the thing in different random places. And secondly, I feel like a rock star that used to be famous. You know, they still create the room, they think he's going to fill it, and then there's like 7 people. And most of those are just like doing their bingo or something, or reading the paper. But hopefully, just like old rock stars are really good, hopefully this presentation will be good as well. My name's Dave West. I'll talk a little bit about me in a minute, but I run Scrum.org, Ken Schwaber's organization, whose mission is to improve the profession of software delivery. And that's what gets me up every day, because software is the most important single commodity in the 21st century. It's the thing that not only drives cars, but puts people on Mars, solves cancer, deals with everything. Food crises, software. Software, you know, it helps us plan against bad weather. It helps us deal with that after that bad weather's happened. Software is the most important commodity in the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, the jobs that you have are the most important jobs. You are the brain surgeons of the 21st century. And that's what excites me, and that's the reason why I work at Scrum.org, and that continues to excite Ken Schwaber and our team. Scrum.org is the home of Scrum. A couple of things about Scrum that I just want to put on the board, because I think this sets the scene for when we start talking about product ownership and the most important single role around product, around a Scrum team, and around Agile development. But 90% of Agile teams are using Scrum. Now, that's between 12 and 15 million people that are doing a daily Scrum. When I say 12 to 15 million, IDC were particularly unhelpful on those numbers, but between 12 and 15 million people doing Scrum. Scrum was invented almost 22 years ago, actually in the office that I work every day. It wasn't actually in that office, it was down in the basement because they couldn't afford the office I'm in. And it was started on a project, and it wasn't invented because they wanted to invent a new methodology or a new process or a new way of approaching software. They invented it, Jeff and Ken, out of necessity. Necessity because they kept delivering crap software. They kept delivering no value to customers, and they thought about doing stuff in a very different way. And I think it's really inspiring that 12 to 15 million people do it every day. It's certainly a pretty scary number. But what's also interesting is that there's only one Scrum guide. And that Scrum guide, we had copies at our booth here. They're all gone now. We've got the Nexus guide, but we've run out of Scrum guides. It's 16 pages. It's translated into 52 languages, and it's very, very simple. You can read it in 10 minutes, or if you're a little slower, 15. Or if it's in German, it must take about an hour because it's 32 pages in German for some reason. And the words are really, really long. But I think that's really sums up one of the key tenets of agility, which is simplicity deals with complexity. And we need to think about simple processes. We need to think about simple approaches. The simpler we can find something, the better. And Scrum is very, very simple. At Scrum.org, we see a little bit about 4 million people a year on the website looking at stuff and the like, and about 1.4 million open assessments were taken over the last few years. We've got 110,000 professional Scrum certifications in the world, and actually almost 90 professional Scrum trainers, of which we have Improving and Cardinal here, and that are great organizations that have some of those trainers. 2,500 people were taught last month by Scrum.org trainers. I think these numbers are incredible. I thought that Scrum was over and we were all done, 5 years ago, but it seems to just keep growing because of that simplicity. But I'm not talking about Scrum today, but I kind of am. I'm talking about product ownership. That's my contact details if you need to talk to me. And the reason why I can talk to you not only is because we at Scrum.org see a lot of people wrestling with product ownership, and they come to the website and they talk to our community in general and the forums that we manage and moderate, but also because I'm a product owner. I'm the product owner of Scrum. When Ken and Jeff are my stakeholders, which is always an interesting experience. Product ownership is hard. and it's challenging. I was a product owner at an organization called TaskTalk. We have somebody from that organization here today, and I was trying to manage delivering value to customers, keeping VCs happy, and also actually moving towards our vision. That was very challenging. I was a product owner for something called the Rational Unified Process. Boo, hiss, hiss, boo. I know, that's when I first met Ken. His first comment to me was, "You're an idiot," which I thought was particularly right, and he still says that was perhaps the most insightful moment he ever had in his life. But that confrontation started a relationship which has lasted some 19 years. Geez, I am that old. Gosh, that's worrying. But the point is that I've done a lot of product ownership in my life, and I've done it very poorly, I think. Obviously not at TaskTalk, Jeff. I did was awesome there. And obviously at scrum.org I've got better, because I don't think I've got the tools, and I'm not even sure I've been trying to do the right job. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. I'm going to talk about the challenges. I'm going to talk about requirements versus ownership. I'm going to talk about who plays the role, and I'm going to hopefully give you some very simple things, because simplicity is the most important thing that we can hopefully get from all of this, to actually help you do your jobs better. How many people in this room are product owners? So there's a few. Okay, well, that's interesting. The rest of you probably just hate product owners, so I'm going to hopefully deal with that as well. I'm going to, hopefully you'll get some empathy by the end of this presentation. I think this sums up sort of product owners. I've added all the product features that each of you demanded, and now our product is worthless. It's very complex. I appreciate your input and would have felt about you. Thanks, team. So as the product manager, I had a really simple job. I was asked by customers, because we were working for Rational Software. We sold for $2.1 billion to IBM, and we were doing about $900 million a year. So it was a pretty sizable company, about 4,000 employees, and I had a lot of different customers, and I basically had to deal with two things as a product owner. Continuously, when I went to see customers or I talked to our sales force, I was asked, hey, we need an SAP module, we need some stuff on SAP, or we need real-time, or we need embedded, or we need systems engineering, we need to support DoD, TOGAF, we need to support, there was this big list of things that people asked. And being a good product owner, I prioritized that and I put them in. And then they said, but we want it to be simpler. It's far too complicated. It's got too many things in it. How do we? So then built a customization capability that allowed you to create something called a development case, which then allowed you to create a website, which actually was only the things that you wanted. But ultimately, I think I missed the point. I was continuously adding features, adding stuff to my product. It got more and more complex, so I had to add a magic button called Make It Simple, even though it's incredibly complex. And I think what I should have been doing is not adding things, but actually taking things away, which that's what Ken told me over and over again, and I completely ignored him. And he mentions it frequently, that when I left the RUP, when I started in the RUP, it was about 1,200 pages of HTML. By the time I left, it was 4,000 pages. Pretty impressive, eh? And it required you to have a visual model to manage. And when somebody said, what value does it deliver? I could say we could print it out and it would be really good at holding doors open. But it was a little bit challenging. So being able to do product ownership is challenging. But in the book, the Scrum Guide, it's really, really simple, right? Look at it. This is taken from the guide. Clearly expresses the product backlog items, so says what we want, right? Orders those items, so says what order that we want. Hey, the great thing about working an Agile product and an Agile project is you don't have to say no. You just say not now. Isn't that great? I use it in my marriage as well. It's brilliant. Unfortunately, I think she may be seeing through it now, which is a little challenging. She asks when, damn it. Anyway, so optimizing the value. So all about value, ensuring that the product backlog is visible or transparent so people can actually understand it, and making sure that the team understand what's in the product backlog. So it's not just a bunch of gobbledygook. So basically, their job is to drive value. to ensure the prioritization of that value and to make sure that the team is building the right stuff right. That does not mean, and this is the most important thing about product ownership, and we're going to talk a lot about this, it doesn't mean they do everything. They do not. It's a leadership role. It's not necessarily a do everything requirements management, every single thing that's necessary to express exactly what that product does, but it is important that they drive the value and prioritize that value. Simple as that. So when you look at the Scrum Framework, and there's some changes coming which I can't talk about, which really frustrates me because there's some things, anyway, I can't talk about those. If you look at the Scrum Framework, the product owner is a key part of the Scrum team. Sets direction, etc. Manages, is involved in a series of events and is responsible for one major artifact called the product backlog. They are involved in sprint planning. Obviously, sprint planning, they help the team based on their capacity, based on their abilities, and based on their understanding, their forecast, to actually plan what's in a sprint. They then help them to refine that continuously during the sprint, their understanding, their appreciation of it. And then at the sprint review, they are responsible for ensuring the stakeholders are involved to get the right feedback. Now, one interesting misnomer about Scrum is people think that you don't deliver continuously in Scrum. Ideally, you do. The best sprint reviews are done with a product owner on software that's been in production and that's given us telemetry from the production usage. And then you invite a bunch of stakeholders in. So the loop is a planning loop or an inspect and an adaptation loop, not a delivery loop that we see there. And then obviously they're part of the team retrospective to ensure that the team's getting better. And those interesting challenges about, well, you didn't tell us that. Well, that wasn't visible. How do we meant to know that? Are things that are uncovered. And that's all Scrum is. It's a very simple, lightweight framework. And the diagram is going to change fundamentally soon, but I'm not going to tell you about that. Anyway, so simply, the product owner in Scrum is a simple role, maximizing value. Sole person. Hey, so why don't you have a committee of product owners? Now, let me just tell you about democracy. Democracy might be groovy and great, but it's really inefficient. It's much better to work for a benevolent dictator than be in a democratic system that takes loads of time to decide what you're going to do, and by the time you've decided you're going to do it, it's now no longer relevant. The point is democracy is incredibly inefficient, and if you look at most organizations are kind of democratic because failure is such a big issue. You should never fail. We always have to be perfect. So we want to make sure we involve everybody without anybody being accountable. We sign off requirements, even though ultimately that signing off just means we've read them. Doesn't mean we actually believe in them, because we're not going to get fired if they're wrong. Or maybe we will, and that's good, then that's accountability. But ultimately, it needs to be one person that makes those decisions. Now, the beauty of Scrum is if they make those decisions and they're wrong, it's massively transparent, right? Because you review it at the sprint review and you're like, well, you don't know shit, do you? Oh, so you don't know anything, do you, mate? And you're like, oh, well, that's a bit embarrassing. Realize that actually I got that completely wrong. Oh, well, fair enough, moving swiftly on. Empowered. This isn't a person that has to go and ask. This isn't a person that has to go and say, well, you know, I need to talk to a few geezers before we can do this. This isn't the concierge in a mafia organization. This is the boss. This is the guy that makes, or the girl that makes the decisions. They're empowered to make those decisions, even if they're wrong. And it's going to be transparent at the sprint review. And no one else can tell the development team what to do unless they're married, obviously, and then their partners can and the like. But nobody else can do that. And maybe if a police officer comes in and like, or firemen, always do what they tell you. But nobody else can do that. And then depending on your organization, how that works will be very variable. There's a very famous product owner. He's a little bit on the spectrum. Steve Jobs, very interesting character. You know, always parked in disabled spots, always wore the same outfit. Was a very odd character, but you knew what he wanted, and he set a very clear vision. And even telling the market that that's what they wanted as well, and we believed him. He was a very passionate product owner. He was a very empowered product owner, even if he got fired, which he did, because he really was accountable and he really was making decisions. If you're not getting stuff wrong, then you're not trying hard enough. He got a lot of things wrong, but he learned from it. With Next, for instance. He learned from it. And that's really, really what a product owner's all about. So now product ownership has got challenges in two different spaces. So if you work for an ISV, an independent software vendor, product ownership is easy when it's one team delivering work for you and when you've got one or two customers. It starts getting horribly wrong and difficult when you grow. Product ownership is relatively simple in terms of at least getting stuff done, even if it's the wrong stuff, that might still be the case. In a small organization, it's when it scales, you start having lots of things that take your time, particularly around outbound and inbound activities, talking to customers, talking to VCs, talking to the press, doing presentations like this. You suddenly become the face of the product, and that takes you away from the day-to-day. Also, the complexity of the product grows as it starts doing more stuff. So it gets harder for somebody to hold it all in their head, even if they are super, super smart like a Steve Jobs. But ultimately, you still own that product vision. And there's more. If you're a small organization with no VC-backed funding and you've got one or two customers, when you do things that are wrong, I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Those two customers leave us. When you've got thousands of customers, when you've got a VC that's given you $12.5 million, then getting stuff wrong becomes more important. So the way you deal with that is make smaller mistakes. That's the trick. But that's hard to do as well because of the complexity that the product has evolved to. That's harder to do because your marketing organization wants a big release. It's harder to do because ultimately your customers are asking for more and more complex things, and there's more customers, so as you aggregate those things, it gets harder and harder to do. In an IoT organization, it's a little different. Most times, IT organizations have product managers often in the business, got nothing to do with technology. They have business analysts and project managers that are kind of sort of like product owners. Project managers make decisions. Business analysts write stuff down. They've got these people, that do things. But now they've got suddenly this new Agile Scrum team, and they're like, well, who's going to be this product owner thing? Is it like a BA? That sounds like a BA thing doing the backlog, right? Is it going to be the project manager? Well, that sounds like a decision maker. Maybe we'll have two roles. Maybe we'll merge it into one and we'll call it Scaled Agile Framework. I don't know. But we'll do something like that. The business, that's technology's responsibility. I don't want to get involved. I know that our business now is a technology business, but don't bore me with technology. And Agile predominantly is being driven by the IT organization. So the business doesn't want to become agile. It wants all the benefits, but it doesn't want any of the pain. They want to be 20 pounds lighter, but they don't want to diet, and they certainly don't want to be involved in the decisions about the diet and etc. And processes have replaced responsibility, right? It's the process that we worry about. It's the system. It's not the people and the accountability of those and the focus. And then we have this organization that enforces the process in leather boots, usually, and little hats called the Project Management Office. If you're lucky, they wear that, and maybe only at weekends. But this organization ensures the process. They know nothing about the content. They know nothing about the customer. They know nothing about the actual situation, but they ensure that the process happens because that's important because they care about funding and risk, money and risk. So it's challenging to introduce product ownership. The other interesting thing, which I didn't write on this slide, is most organizations aren't oriented towards products, they are project-oriented. So what happens about that then? Do we magically create a product owner who just owns it for that period of time that this project exists and then disappears? Is that how we do it? Or do we have something more long-standing? How do we do that? Well, orienting towards products is perhaps the first step to agility, but that's another story. So, the other thing that we have to answer is things like, how much is it going to cost? When we're going to get it? What we're going to get? What are you doing for me? When's it going to be ready? When's, et cetera, et cetera. And then the PMO says, when's all those forms going to be filled in? So, how do we answer those questions like that? It's challenging. And then there's other stuff. This is Pragmatic Marketing. I did a webinar with Pragmatic Marketing. 5,500 people signed up for it. 3,500 people came. This is a really relevant problem. And Pragmatic Marketing have a framework. This is the framework. You can see, you don't have to know what all these things are, but ultimately, there's a lot of stuff that they recommend product managers have in terms of marketing, in terms of outbound, inbound, in terms of pricing, in terms of competitor analysis, in terms of all these things. And they're saying, and now we have to also manage a backlog, and now we have to do user stories, and the user stories have to be testable, and now we have to define test criteria, and now we have to do all this other stuff. I'm drowning. So it's hard. So let's try to address some of these issues. Let's try to talk a little bit about what product ownership is. Let's try to solve some of these problems, but not solve it in terms of more stuff, but solve it in terms of what we should be focusing on, the important things. The ownership dilemma. A product owner is both sensing the market. Ultimately, they have to own the vision. That's probably the most important thing a product owner can do. They own the vision of where the product is going. That means they have to understand the market. Now, a market is a really trendy word that describes a collection of random customers that we're trying to group in some defined way. So they really have to understand the customer. I'm really excited about design thinking at the moment. I'm really enjoying the ideas that are coming out from people like Jeff Gothard, etc. The ideas of understanding customers, the ideas of really sensing their needs, building these opportunity gaps, as it were, and trying to really build an understanding and affinity with customers. And Lean Startup provides us with other things around this. They then need to help define, looking at these opportunities, what the value is to the organization. That used to be called a business case, but tends to manifest itself in some sort of canvas and some sort of roadmap today. And they need to help plan which things are the most important, which value things should we deliver first, which things provide us with that foundation, which technologies do we need to take advantage of while working with a team. And then, of course, they need to tell people about it and help people understand it. So ownership is all those things. That's a lot of things that we need to be able to do. And as an owner, we need to be able to do enough of all of those things to get great products that wow customers. How many roles, how many products? The other thing that's really interesting is, and then I'm going to move on to fixing some of these things, is this is an interesting, the highest, what drives devs crazy the most isn't any of these other things, the boss, the recruiters, documentation, CI servers, any of these things, it's product management and the product owner. So as General MacArthur says, the enemy is in front of us, the enemy is behind us, the enemy is to the right. Basically, as a product owner, often you feel surrounded. Because the customers, they just want everything tomorrow, and they've got no time to worry about you, and it's a complex situation. The devs hate you because you're continuously giving them the impossible. The management really dislikes you because you can't give them all the answers to the money that you're going to spend and the value you're going to recruit. And your wife or husband hates you because you're never home, and you always look very, very stressed. Great. So let's start with requirements. Let's start thinking a little bit about requirements. I always like to start with a deal, but ultimately, the defining of requirements, this act, is still really, really important in Agile projects. Don't think that you don't do requirements. So with the Rationify process, we invented something called the use case, right? It was invented by Ivar Jakobsen. And Ivar is an interesting character. He invented the use case because He was working at MIT, and Ericsson had a disaster. They were trying to release the first soft switch to market. And he was called back from MIT. He was working on some postdoctoral research at MIT, and he was called back from Boston to Kista, to Sweden, and they asked him, can you save this project? And he said, okay, what does this thing do? And they gave him catalogs of features and functions in this very complex thing. And he spent the weekend of a marker pen creating the uses, which sounds a lot better in Swedish, by the way, and the cases for the system, the use cases. And that's why he invented use cases. It was basically created out of necessity, which is interesting. Requirements continue to be really, really important. You have to be able to express the things. Now, how you do them, you might not do use cases anymore, you might not do UML diagrams, you might not do anything, but ultimately, the activity is still crucial in an Agile project. There's no magic in agility, other than the fact that it creates an environment that allows transparency and allows teams to work more effectively together. You still need to do the work, though. It's not a Fred Brooks, as Fred Brooks would say, a silver bullet. Who does the work? The Scrum team does the work. You have to still do requirements. It's not the product owner doing the requirements. It's the Scrum team, which includes the product owner, right? So sometimes the product owner might do some stuff. Sometimes somebody else might do some stuff. It's very important to start building people that are like combs, a broad set of skills and specialists in a few areas. And that means that everybody should do, and they should be allowed to self-organize around that work, which is really important. So first thing, do not expect the product owner to do everything. That's the most important sort of tenet around requirements. The other important point is how those requirements are articulated. We never sort of manage this with use cases and the software requirements document in RUP, but it's very clear from the design thinking and the work of people like Jeff, the two Jeffs, Jeff Patton, Jeff Goppard, that outcome-based backlog items with clear measures of success are key. How many people can look at their backlogs today and look at the items that are in that and say, these items are clearly articulated in terms that determine the outcome that you're trying to achieve. The less we say how we're going to achieve it, the more, dare I use the word, agility we allow for the team to create. So maybe the outcome is, instead of saying we're going to update this field on a form, we say what the outcome we're seeking from that field being on that form means. We may say an example would be we update this, but ultimately we need to start expressing our stories and our PBIs as outcomes. And then as soon as you do that, suddenly it becomes easier for the team to start understanding the solutions necessary. It's very important that you change requirements into these outcome-oriented, some would say hypotheses, depends on the type of requirement, but certainly in terms of defines what you're trying to achieve rather than how you're going to achieve it. The product owner takes those items whilst working with the team and manages it in terms of the backlog. The backlog is the representation of the stuff that the product owner wants to deliver. Now, the backlog is going to be many different things. It's going to be some things in infinite detail that describe something really, really well. It's well understood. Maybe that's a definition of ready, maybe that's not. I'm not a big fan of definition of ready. I think it sort of leads to waterfall thinking, but we'll ignore that for a second. Some people love it, and interestingly, I also do it, but I still don't like it. It's one of those sort of like, ugh. So you've got some items that are well-formed and well-defined, some items that aren't, and some items that really aren't. And you're going to have a backlog that's like that. The reason why refinement could be in the Scrum Guide, it isn't at the moment. The reason why refinement is so important is it's an activity that you should do at least weekly with the Scrum team. You should continuously work with the team to refine the backlog so you're managing that. So you're getting more of those items that are understood. So you're getting more transparency of stuff that's coming so that they then are factoring that into the development that they're doing at that moment. So you're always thinking ahead, and refinement should happen at least weekly, maybe more frequently than that. On more complex and more messy projects, I do refinement even like twice a week, which is crazy. The other important point is this concept of a vision, setting true north. So if a product owner isn't responsible for building out all the requirements, but they are responsible for the backlog, what else do they have to do, really? They have to set the direction. Steve Jobs was really good at that, right? We get that. Elon Musk, really good at that. Mark Zuckerberg, increasingly good at that, actually. I don't think he was. I think he was, and then he wasn't, and now he's sort of like, and do you know how he's getting better? He's going and talking to people. I don't know if you follow him on Twitter, or actually he doesn't do Twitter, probably sensibly, or Facebook. You know, it's like, I don't do the competitor, which he really should, because then he'd learn something, right? Anyway, but what he does is a really good job at the moment is he's going and talking to lots of people. And he's talking to them about bubbles of understanding and your social circles and how it's just reinforcing the separation of ideas in America. Anyway, but what's really interesting is he's starting to really take ownership now for what Facebook is as a social platform. I'm really excited about what the future for Facebook, because I think without this, I think it will die. And which is what, all those pictures of my kids, where they're going to go, I don't know. But setting that vision, setting that true north. But the other thing about visions, which again customers hate, is that things change. We want to be agile, but we don't like change. How many times do you hear that? The plans will change as your understanding changes. That means that you have to continuously be communicating your vision. So at scrum.org, we communicate to the PSTs quarterly, which is probably not enough, but I haven't got much time. So we do quarterly, and I talk about what we've learned from the last quarter, and I talk about what we're doing in the next quarter based on that learning, and what that has done to my roadmap, to my vision. And I set that continuously, and I reset it continuously. And every sprint, our understanding, our movement against this vision and our roadmap really helps us refine it, and we must document that because it's really, really important. But I still have a long-term vision for where Scrum.org is going, and I still have that true north. But it is changing a little bit, because as the profession of software delivery changes, as things like DevOps, design thinking, lean startup become more relevant, as millennials don't learn in different ways, I have to think about where Scrum.org is going, and I have to set this story in the context of this, and we are continuously delivering experiments to sort of learn about that, which helps. The other thing about product owners is so vision and backlog, two of the most important things that they worry about. The second thing is how do they make decisions. They make decisions, they are empowered to make decisions, right? They have to make decisions. That means that a product owner also has to be good at dealing with people, I'm afraid. They have to be good at Steve Jobs never really did a good job of this. That's why he was fired, predominantly, I think. But imagine me. This is a discussion with Ken. Hey, Ken, you know that you hate internationalization of a translation of assessments. Yeah. Well, we're going to do it. No, we're not. You're not doing that. This is the kind of conversations. So what do we do instead? I have a conversation with, hey, Ken, you know we're breaking into the South America's becoming really hot. Well, they don't speak English as much. They're more. I thought we'd like to do an experiment, particularly in product owner, because the product owner isn't in technology. I spend a lot of time talking about the context and talking about how I'm going to prove this hypothesis. And I break it into very small, manageable chunks. And I communicate this continuously. And I don't take Ken to the pub, but I do take people to the pub and get them drunk. That always helps, I find, particularly in England. I do all the politicking, the stuff that you have to do. But a product owner has to be good at this. And it's something we don't really help them to be good at, which is also interesting. And as it becomes more complex, the product, as there's more stuff going on, they have to become more of that leader. They have to become more of that executive managing all of these groups. They have to have communication plans, maybe not explicitly written down, but in their head. They have to have a key simple messaging story that they deliver over and over again. They have to understand their stakeholders in quite an intimate way to ensure that they're managing all these different points of view and the like. And it's not easy. But the backlog gives you some power. It gives you the ability to say, yes, but not now. It gives you the ability to say, and this is how we're doing. It gives you the ability to be transparent to your customers. If you empower your teams to actually start helping you refine and define that backlog in terms of the items in it, then it starts getting even more powerful. You start representing the balances and the compromises that you have to make. One great example is, so VCs hate doing work that doesn't generate direct, immediate value. They don't like doing that. And when they mean value, they mean customers buying stuff, by the way. They don't mean platform, they don't mean debt, they don't mean defects, they mean customers buying stuff. So at TaskTop, it was really interesting that we had some challenges around value, around testing, and around the need to, we're doing lifecycle integration, and getting all these things to work together is very challenging. So you can imagine, I wanted to build an incredibly complex test platform. Now, go into a board meeting and tell a VC, we're going to spend the next 6 months building a brand new platform to test the product and add no new features to the product. They weren't particularly happy about that. So instead, we said, okay, let's start getting some guardrails about building some of that whilst adding some new features and whilst doing some defects. So I built out these very transparent guardrails, and we communicated how we were doing against that. So suddenly, it wasn't do this or this, it was a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. Now, as it happened, I had a plan that actually allowed us to do more of that platforming stuff at the start and less. Sounds a bit waterfall, I know, but it allows us to get some of this foundational stuff. But I made it very transparent. I demonstrated the balance that was necessary. The vision we've talked a lot about, I'm not going to bore you anymore, but you need as a leader to, so I will bore you because I'm a leader, that's what we do. No, you have to be continuously communicating your vision to customers, to the team. You've got to be ridiculously boring in talking about this stuff. But you also have to refresh it and tell them, this is the situation based on what we're doing. This is how we're moving against it. Okay, backlog, vision, political, politicking, a bit of house of cards maybe. Maybe not quite as bad as that, but managing stakeholders, communicating the vision, being clear, being transparent, using guardrails, making sure the balance is clearly articulated. So who does this in your organization? Now, most ISVs, it's the person that they just happen to have a product owner, product manager. Originally in Scrum, it was called the Agile Project Product Manager. Part of me kind of likes that term because it's an industry term anyway. However, the reality was that the reason why Ken changed it was because the product managers weren't empowered to make decisions, and he wanted to emphasize the value of empowerment and the value of making decisions. And that's why it's called the product owner. So who plays the role? What hat do you wear? Could it be any of these people? Business analyst, a project manager, a product manager, a relationship manager. Some organizations have these concepts called relationship managers, which isn't about making your marriage work, apparently, though they may do that in their spare time as well. It's about managing the relationship between business and IT, which sounds awful that you have to have that, which means you're always about to get divorced. So you always have to go to counseling, and you always have to have a geezer that walks around going, well, I never really trusted in Star Trek, Counselor Troy. You know that lady that was an empath? Isn't that a little bit unfair, having somebody that can read minds to help you get over issues? I mean, doesn't it sort of get in the way of you actually changing your behavior and being more transparent to your fellow crew member? But secondly, shouldn't they just teach everybody how to do that? Isn't that sort of like an anathema to the whole federation idea? But anyway, maybe I talk about Star Trek a little bit like, oh my God, this guy doesn't go out much, does he? No, I really don't. And Star Trek was my life. And she was English, but she had this really weird American accent. What the hell was that all about? Anyway, so relationship manager, Counselor Troy. Don't have her, no. Who is, so how many of you guys have product managers that are business analysts? Either you are a business analyst or you are, yeah. I can see that happens. How many product owners are from the project management community? Yeah, a few of those. What about actually taking somebody from the business that was formerly called a product manager and make him a product owner? Do we ever see that? A little bit of that as well. And then, anybody got Counselor Troy in their organization? No. Good. Anyway, but maybe that's another place. So what does SAFE, Scaled Agile Framework, Dean Leffingwell, I've got an admission, Dean Leffingwell is the reason why I'm in America. So he doesn't always do bad. No, he's a good guy. He moved me to America. He signed the check. So he was my boss's boss on the RUP, Russian Unified Process. Well, Dean does something really interesting around scale that I see why he does it. He separates the business role from the technology role. He has that product manager from the business making decisions, and he says, well, that's great. To scale that, we need another role that's the product owner in Scrum and technology that does that work. And then obviously the team can talk to customers as well. So he has this whole sort of like hierarchical model around that. Now, I'm not a big fan of that. Scaled Agile Framework definitely is a really good framework for implementing Water Scrum Fall, but it is, and it has its definitely strengths, and I'm not going to diss it, but the separation of the role you have to do and think a little bit about. One, who owns the decision making? So agility falls apart when you're dependent on a queue, right? We all get that. When you're doing your daily, and somebody says, we don't call them a stand-up anymore because that's not cool. But anyway, so we're doing a daily scrum, and we say, hey, how's that? You took that PBI, you're working on that product backlog item. How's it going? Yeah, I'm waiting on a decision from Fred, and Fred's in Antigua at the moment. Oh, move it into the blocked column. That kind of gets in the way, doesn't it? Undermines us. So the issue with ownership, when you have this sort of multiple hierarchical ownership model, where the business has to be involved, it slows down your team and it undermines your agility, in inverted commas, which is cool. And that has a cost of delay inside your organization. It also creates this idea of, we call it in America, I was going to say, we call it in America. I'm in America. I was in Poland last week, sorry. We call it telephone here, right? In England, it's called Chinese whispers, and I have no idea why. But have you ever been to China? It's very loud. Anyway, so there's this game called telephone where if there's multiple people, I want a sausage roll. He goes, I want a roll of sausage. And it ends up being, I want a cat with 4 heads. And you're like, how did that happen? And why is it always a cat? Anyway, so miscommunication. Teams become dumber. They start taking no responsibility for things because it's somebody else's responsibility. We just build software, dude. Now, all of these things are addressable, all these things are dealable with, but it can be. And it makes the product owner an order taker rather than an order maker. Separation of roles can be dangerous, so treat it with respect. But I understand the challenges, particularly as you scale, and you want very clear responsibilities. And as you scale, you start seeing the need for that. So I see why you do that. So let's think about then who plays this role. Each situation is different. However, these are some things that I've observed. When you have situations that there's a large amount of complexity and there's few stakeholders, it tends to be product managers from the business because they tend to be better suited to managing these kind of situations that are very complex, that are very business-oriented. Imagine we're building a margin management system. Imagine that margin management system is supporting the margins associated with energy pricing. I did this at UBS. It was a really interesting project. Sounds not interesting, but it was kind of cool. And that we had to get somebody from the business because it was so bloody complicated. pricing energy is surprisingly, I just thought it was pretty simple. Oil costs this amount and you added this, but tax and variability in supply and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, so from the business, product owner. If you've got a pretty simple situation, pretty simple problem, but there's loads of people involved in it, then project managers tend to make good product owners. And then if you've got large complexity, large amounts of stakeholders, I've got no bloody idea. Good luck. Find a superhero and you'll be good. But ultimately, it's about empowered business knowledge, business savvy, knowledgeable technology. That's a really bad sentence. Empowered business knowledgeable savvy technologists. So we want people that kind of can sit these two worlds. Ideally, they come from the business and they have a panache for technology, but they may come from technology and have a panache for business. I don't quite know what panache means, but it sounds really cool. So just use that if ever in doubt. But ultimately, they have two things that they have to be able to do. So this really helps us make the decision. They have to be empowered to make decisions, and available for the team to resolve conflicts and questions. My experience is you get one of those two. Pick them. Pick one. You either have somebody that's available that never can make any decisions, or you get somebody that can make decisions that's never available. So you may just decide to pick the person that can make decisions and just give them a phone. and then they allow you to phone. Or there's this wonderful thing called Slack. Some people may be aware of it. It's a unicorn. They're making millions of dollars, billions of dollars potentially as a value company. However, it's just really a messaging tool. But anyway, that might help as well. Okay. So this is challenging, actually, though. And we did a survey recently where we found the majority of people the people that they loved, because we live in hierarchical organizations, decisions were made up, responsibility was driven down. And that's like an anathema to agility, right? We want accountability and responsibility all to be sort of together. And so this is actually surprisingly challenging, which is kind of cool. So how do we make it all work? So we own the vision as a product owner. Very important. Can articulate true north to the team. Can communicate. We manage the backlog, but we work with a team to load that backlog with lots of really important things. We then prioritize that work in the backlog into the most important things. And when we manage the massive amount of different opinions from multiple stakeholders, we balance this backlog. And when we communicate it back in the context of our vision continuously, we accept that we're going to make mistakes and we refine that back into the process. So how do we make it work? So we have this concept, the mini CEO, where you can see, well, maybe you can't because it's very, very small, isn't it? You've got basically this idea, that we slowly move from managing you move from being a scribe, we evolve the role, is the point of this diagram. The idea made more sense when I built it, obviously. You evolve the role. Maybe we start with being a scribe and we accept that. And so we, do the daily plan, help the sprint planning, but we really are more of an order taker, more traditional. Then we move to being a proxy, where we really, instead of just taking the release ideas from the management and turning it into a sprint plan, we actually act as that proxy, where we start really owning that release plan and taking that vision that's owned by somebody else. We then start taking some ownership of the product strategy. And hopefully we can then start setting that vision, which then relates into the release plan, which then breaks down into the individual sprints, which then drive this overall thing. And that's, that sort of business representative, that person that's empowered. We then start getting ownership of the money. We start owning the value that we're delivering. And you can think of that really as in terms of the business strategy. And then lastly, we start taking risks. We start being that entrepreneur. We start really driving those hypotheses to market. We start owning the outcomes of that solution. Now, at most organizations, product owners are at many different places on this continuum. Possibly you're only at the start, around what we would call scribe. It doesn't have to be called scribe, but that sort of like order taker kind of thing. That's okay. But remember that every single dependency you have outside the team will make the team less agile. Every single dependency. The reason why that's important is ultimately you're going to slow the team down and reduce its value. If we move into being a proxy, that's okay. That's a bit better than scribe, but ultimately now you're not necessarily taking ownership of the actual release, as it were. Or you'll take ownership of the release, but you don't own the overall vision. You're taking somebody else's ideas and making it real, which is cool. Then, if you start owning that vision and being that owner of the business, you need to then start thinking about how can I own the value that business is delivering, the cost and the value, the P&L. And then ultimately, as an entrepreneur, how can I start owning the risk and start delivering the value and start really owning this whole thing? It used to be called mini CEO. The reason why I changed it to entrepreneur without changing the title of the slide was a mistake. But the reason why I changed it is because I'm a CEO and product owner, and I find that I care about the value of the products that we're delivering, the PST community, the assessments, the thought leadership, things like Nexus, etc. at scrum.org, the things that I really care about. But I also care about how we're doing it, because I care about the team, the risks they're taking, their development, the costs, all of that sort of stuff. Now, should I worry as a product owner about some of that stuff? I feel that I'm continuously in conflict, because ultimately I want to drive us to this product vision that I see for scrum.org. But I worry so much about the team, I find there's a conflict. Because I manage and am responsible and pay all the team. It's kind of complicated. So I think entrepreneur captures it better, because most of the entrepreneurs I've met, and maybe some of my people that I worked with at Fasttalk could say this, they don't really care about the people. They care about the thing that they're doing. And maybe that captures it better. Maybe it doesn't. I'll change this back to CEO. I don't know. But there is an interesting conflict there. Okay, so the last thing that I want to just highlight is the habits. So we talked about vision, we talked about backlog, we talked about the team helping and populate that backlog, we talked about managing stakeholders, we talked about who can play it in which situation and what I've observed in the market. And then we talked a little bit about entrepreneurship and how it's sort of like a maturity model for product ownership as it goes through these stages, which is quite interesting. The last thing is really, and this is taken from a PST called Charles Bradley, who's prolific and amazing and PST around this, professional Scrum trainer around this. He talks about the two things, the two sides, building the right thing and building it right. Building the right thing and building it right. The product owner is on the right side of this, or stage right, so you're left. They need to be the market expert. They need to understand the customer. They need to decide what value we're going to give the customer when. They need to define that where we're taking this product. They need to be able to maximize the value, understand the trade-offs. And to do that, they have to use the backlog. To do that, they have to help people understand the sprint review and get the right feedback so they inspect and adapt. So that's the other interesting thing is the best product owners are really good at sprint reviews. Not in terms of giving the most feedback. Sometimes they give their feedback a long time before the sprint review, which is great. What they do is they ask questions in the sprint review of the stakeholders that aren't normally involved. And they're asking questions to gain insights so they can inspect and adapt the product. So maybe they've invited the CEO, maybe they've invited some representative customers, Maybe they've invited some competitive analysis people. Maybe they've invited, the people that they manage the invite list. That's an important idea. And they invite the right people so you have this right sort of inspection and adaptation opportunity on the product. So that's important. And then they collaborate with the team to make and to build the right thing. Okay. This has been like everything you need to know about product ownership. No, it really hasn't. There's a fabulous talk this afternoon about story mapping, that really great Jeff's approach, which is really, really cool. I recommend if you're interested in being able to really get to the heart of what a story is and be able to understand it. I'm useless at story mapping, but some people are very good, and there's a great session this afternoon about that. There's trying to understand techniques like lean startup and design thinking. I'd recommend the new book, Sense and Respond by Jeff Goldhab. Anyway, Jeff G. He's written a really interesting book called Sense and Respond. I'd recommend reading all of Stephen Blank's work. And then, if you find that too tiresome, read the summary, which is called Lean Startup by Eric Ries. I'd recommend thinking a little bit about, there's a really interesting book called The Inmates Have Taken Over the Asylum, which is all about design. Lots of stuff that I haven't talked about being a good product owner. I've tried to emphasize the important stuff in terms of the role and responsibilities. So you're not responsible for writing all the test cases. As boring and as important as that is, as important as that is, creating all the requirements, knowing everything about everything. I mean, obviously I do, but not everybody should do that. You are responsible for delivering value, managing trade-offs, leading the delivery of amazing, valuable products that execute on the vision of our organization. These are some of the characteristics of who does it. Don't know where they come from. We talked a bit about that. They have to be a visionary. They have to make decisions even if they're bad decisions. They have to be communicative. They have to be empowered, and they have to be available. Those things are the things that really are important for a product owner to really live and breathe. But ethically, morally, they need to think about something else. These are the 5 values of Scrum. They were added to the Scrum Guide on July the 7th. 7th last year. And the reason why they were added was because ultimately we've observed that the best Scrum teams weren't just enacting a process. They weren't just doing all the events, taking the artifacts, embodying the roles. They were living a set of ethical, social, moral things that were very different to Scrum teams that were doing it badly, even if they were doing the same activities, events, etc., etc. Courage. A great product owner admits that they don't know everything, but they do it in a way that says, let's build some software to find that thing out. They're courageous in terms of their pursuit of the value that their product has potential. They focus on, out of all the noise, they provide the team with a clear, this is what we need to do today, generally in terms of a goal, call that a sprint goal, hopefully. This is what we need to do this next period of time, call that a release goal. They may be the same, they may be even shorter. They provide commitment. They're committed not to necessarily a particular set of features on a particular date. They're committed to doing the process. They're committed to delivering this value, to trying to deliver this value. They're committed to the experiment. They're committed to the action of the thing. And that hopefully will deliver value. They respect the team. And that's important. They don't bark at the team. They don't give orders to the team, though ultimately they are the person that defines what the team does. They respect them. They value their input. They listen to them. They may make decisions that the team disagrees with, so the team has to respect them. That's also very, very important, because ultimately it's their decision, even if it's wrong. But the team needs to be committed when that decision, even if they think it's wrong, is executed on, which is challenging. And they need to be open. Open and transparent. So they're not Machiavellian, usually, the successful ones. They provide transparency in context. They tell the story and the situation. They demonstrate the value in that situation, and they try to provide you with a good understanding of where they're going, and they are open to inspection and adaptation through transparency. So the values are important, not just for the Scrum team, not just for the developers and the people, testers, and the other people that are on the Scrum team, not just for the Scrum Master. They're important because they help product owners really become good product owners. Product owners that really embody the values of agility and that really can build great products for their customers. Now, obviously, Steve Jobs may have failed a few of these values, like respect. I don't think he really did that. Openness, not really his thing. Focus was great. Courage was great. Commitment was great. But I sometimes question whether he was as good as I say then, maybe. I wonder what it was like to work for him. Anyway, that's what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about. Hopefully you've found this interesting. Hopefully it's made you think a little bit about the role of product ownership a little differently. And I think we've got time for 10 minutes of questions, because I know you'd like to get to your next session, et cetera, et cetera. Any questions or comments? No? Yeah? No? My gosh. Oh, gentleman there that I really can't see because of the light just behind you. You're Welsh? Oh, so ignoring that one, any other questions? Okay, no, I kind of like the Welsh. Oh, that's an interesting point. Yeah, could product managers have fun, and could teams have fun? Yeah. But they have fun because they're doing something that they know why they're doing it. They don't just have fun because they drink a lot, and so that's obviously discounting the Welsh automatically. They don't just have fun because they drink a lot and play rugby at the weekend and can sing really well. No, they have fun because the product owner gives them a clear idea of why we're doing that. And they smile and they laugh when they get things wrong. And they laugh when they learn something that they didn't know before because they were stupid. And they realize that. And they accept that. They don't take themselves too seriously. So fun is an important thing. Have you read Joy, Inc.? The Menlo Park stuff? The stuff. That's a really interesting. It talks about how you bring joy into the workplace. And one of the characteristics about that, and it fits very nicely with the opening keynote, is that you to give them purpose. And you don't take yourselves too seriously, even if it's the most important job in the world. And you kind of smile at that. And arrogance. So the reason why Steve Jobs might not have been a good product owner, he was a little bit arrogant, wasn't he? And I don't think arrogance lends itself well to this role. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it depends on the situation. If you're building a financial services system in Wall Street, the only way to survive is arrogance, maybe. I don't know. I just don't know. But yes, joy. Okay, cool. It's a good book. He's very tall as well, so anyway. Nice guy, Richard. Any other questions, comments? What about the guys on the periphery? There must be something. You're like, oh, gosh, why is everybody behind that light? Okay, I feel like I'm being immigration. Okay, so how do we get good feedback at sprint reviews? What are the sort of questions that I would use? So obviously it is very context specific, but what I always try to find is, okay, so if you were using this, why would you be using this? Why? The best sprint reviews are with things that are in production, remember? So that means I've got some telemetry, some data, some instrumented data, some feedback. So the great thing about that is I ask why a lot. hey, so we noticed that only 500 people went to this page, and only 5 actually entered this piece of information. What do you think? Why would they not do that? So I ask difficult questions. I ask questions like, and maybe I basically, maybe I put them on the board, maybe I even send them beforehand to do some prep. I like questions based on data. So if I've got data, I like to question why, because obviously even the best data in the world, you don't tend to know why. So I'm asking a lot of whys in sprint reviews. I'm like, why would we do this? Why would somebody not do this? Why would somebody not use this field? Why would somebody, oh my God, there's a big sign. So we have, when you buy an assessment, which you can buy assessments online at scrum.org, there's a big thing that says, you will be sent a password after you buy it. Big thing, red letters, flashing, right? Great. Every time somebody presses that button and it goes then to the homepage, the thing to start the assessment, the amount of, not every time, but a lot of times people press the support button and say, where's my assessment password? Even though it says in big letters it's going to be emailed to you to ensure fraud and all that kind of crap. We separate the two. And even though we've just told them that, and it's big. And so we got some customers and we asked them the question, why? And they said, oh, I only read what's on the bottom. So we moved it next to the button, said, oh yeah, look at your email. That's all we said, look at your email. And suddenly that went down. Those sort of questions are really getting those insights, asking that why, the 5 whys. Why? Why'd you do that? Well, because of this. Why is that? Oh, why? That's really, really useful. That's what I ask over and over again in an almost annoying way until they shut up. Yeah, which is good. Great question. Thank you. See, you're great at questions, so you'll be fine. Lady there. Oh, got a microphone. Or are you just about to sing?
If you could suggest one thing, kind of short, perhaps, to read, to hand to our CEO or up, whatever level up, for them to really understand basically that entire concept of ownership needed to be attached to product owners.
So I would send them a picture of Steve Jobs and say, this is what we're creating. Are you ready for it? And then put at the top of that, market valuation, cash in the bank, Apple. Put that at the top, put a picture of Steve Jobs, and then put a little sign, so do some photoshopping here, put a little sign, maybe he's holding it, that'd be cool, that says, are you ready for product ownership? That's what I would do if I was going to communicate to my CEO. One thing, obviously, I'd make them attend a presentation by Dave West. That'd be the best thing. Or any of our PSTs as well at Cardinal or Improving. But if I had to just say one thing, that's what I would do. I'd give it to them and I'd say, you think you want the truth? This is the truth. Are you ready for the truth? That was a film thing. Anyway, you can't handle the truth. So that's what I would do. Does that answer your question? Have a go. And also, that would at least get a conversation going, because they don't expect that, do they? They expect PowerPoint or Excel. I don't think executives can deal with anything other than email, PowerPoint, and Excel. And if you try something different, you're like, oh, that's weird. Might be a good idea. Okay, we've got maybe one more question, and then any more questions? It's really hard. It's like being in the Inquisition here. I can't really see. Any... No? No more questions? Well, good luck product owning. Remember, empathy for your product owners. It's a hard job. Make their life better. And have fun at the rest of this conference. It's great being here in Columbus. Thank you.